Hey, what's happening? Welcome to Maych TV. Listen, I'd quite like to talk to you about Florian Wirtz. He put in a man of the match display in Liverpool's 2-0 win over West Ham at the weekend. And for some, this was seen as Wirtz's arrival at Liverpool. Now, he has played quite a few minutes in quite a few games, but people have been waiting for a performance to hang their hat on from the young German, have been waiting for a game like this. So I want to chat about what made this game stand out, why it might be the future of Arne Slot's Liverpool, why it might be the saviour of Arne Slot's job as Liverpool manager. Maybe this was the plan all along. And I want to talk a little bit about the axis between him and Alexander Isak. Liverpool broke the British transfer record twice in the summer transfer window. And there's been a lot of criticism about Liverpool not winning enough football matches, which is fair in a very, top line piece of analysis. But they also haven't been able to get their 2 stars on the pitch as regularly as some people might think. So let's start with looking at Wirtz's performance against West Ham. So for a number of weeks, there's been a little bit of a sort of ongoing battle over Florian Wirtz, and it's people who care about him as a person and as a footballer, people who've maybe managed him before or played with him, both at the national team and Bayer Leverkusen, and ultimately Liverpool fans who want to see him succeed and are prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt after what I think, even by the most kind of analysis, has been a slow start to his Liverpool career. He hasn't quite hit the ground running in a way that people expected for the talent we were explained or was prescribed. And of course, obviously the huge transfer fee that Liverpool paid to get him. I think that's all pretty reasonable. But you've also had, obviously, people then go, oh, well, they'll pay loads of money for him. What's he doing? He's been an absolute flop. And loads of the sort of real Z-list ex-players who populate Sky Sports News on a day-to-day basis have been desperate to sort of get the claws out for Flo Wirtz, and understandable, but perhaps a little bit over-egged. What you've had is a lot of, again, the sensible people looking at underlying numbers, and the people who are into underlying numbers of things have been quite keen to stress that there's a lot going on there that's maybe bubbling beneath the surface, as yet to kind of break out, but kind of like a footballer's football type performance at the time. He's good doing good stuff off the ball, but the demonstrable stuff, the ultimate output and the eyeball test at times as well, the stuff that when you are paying just a cursory sort of glance over a footballer who's signed as a creative 10, you want to see goals and assists, don't you? Well, listen, the West Ham performance absolutely did not add to those overlying numbers of Florian Wirtz, but anyone who watched that game will have seen Florian Wirtz play and will have seen and probably been impressed by how he played, because his fingerprints were all over the good things that Liverpool did all over the pitch. Now, what Liverpool did in terms of personnel, Mohamed Salah falls to the bench, and there was a lot of chat about whether Wirtz is coming in for him. And whilst he technically did in personnel terms, in tactical terms, it wasn't quite as straightforward as that. Dominic Szoboszlai took up more of a right-hand side position, and Wirtz was nominally named in the 10. Now, there's been an ongoing conversation. Now, the rumours that swirled around Florian Wirtz in the summer was that Arne Slot had a plan, a real plan for him that helped to sell Liverpool and his project to Florian Wirtz when there was interest from Bayern Munich and there was interest from Manchester City. And we've been saying as Liverpool fans, well, what the hell was this plan? Because we've seen Wirtz used in a bit of a 10 quite a lot at times in the early stages of the season. Saw him briefly used leftish in a 4-2-2-2, whatever, against Crystal Palace. He played right-ish in a pseudo 4-4-2 away in the Champions League to Frankfurt. The point is that it feels like he's kind of been getting moved around a bit to get in the team. None of this has particularly felt like the kind of thing that he was probably being sold on. Utility man, get your game where you can. The suspicion is that for someone with that kind of prospect and ceiling and suitors, he was probably being told that he was going to be the main man at Liverpool, and there hasn't been loads of evidence of that so far. And West Ham was very much at the first for me, and it's backed up into the numbers and in some of the more obvious data. Feels like the first game where that was really coming to fruition for Slot and for Florian Wirtz. So yes, although there's a There's a little confusion ultimately over what formation Liverpool are maybe playing. I'm sure Slot would claim it's a 4-3-3. I think it's a fair shout to say it's a 4-2-3-1 because the overall positioning of Ryan Gravenberch and Alexis McAllister is far more as a double pivot. I'll bring up the average positions throughout the game, and look, they can be skewed sometimes, but it's quite plain to see Gravenberch and McAllister there. Now, there were times in the game where one would go and one would stay, and that would alternate throughout it, often when playing football with Florian Wirtz. But yeah, that kind of gives you the shape. And what you don't see, what you tend to see with Mohamed Salah teams is it's very, very 4-3-3 because he's so advanced on that right-hand side. He is an inside forward, an inverted winger, come forward rather than an old school right winger that we'd have, grew up in the 90s or whatever. And I'm well aware that I dropped the word come in there and it sounded a bit weird, but thank you so much for rolling with it. So, the traditional Klopp Liverpool 4-3-3, you'd have seen Mane and Salah very high on both flanks, and then more of a false nine-ish where the centre forward drops a little bit deeper. He's more withdrawn from those two. Whereas what you can see from the West Ham, it's Alexander Isak, who's the tip of the spear, pushed high, Gakpo's deep, and actually Szoboszlai's deeper and slightly more tucked in on the side as well. And then actually the second most advanced player that Liverpool have got, just about ahead of Gakpo, is Florian Wirtz. Now, before we go back into the overall positioning thing, I just want to draw your attention to his heat map. So in the summer, I did a video about Wirtz and what Liverpool were likely to be getting, and I looked at a bunch of his heat maps from a variety of different games that he played for Bayer Leverkusen. Sometimes he was starting from the left-hand side of a 4-2-3-1, or he'd start in a sort of in a 2 at times or up top, or he'd start in a 10. The point is he played in a variety of different positions, and even though they were normally known as a 3 at the back side, there was a little bit of flexibility how Xabi Alonso played, and particularly played him, ultimately because he's such a talented lad, which I guess would have been a bit more kind of horses for courses, rather than Bayer being this totally dominant force that could just play their way week in, week out. But yeah, what we saw at the time was like his overall season heat map kind of tells a story, and it's just the opposition half of the pitch is Florian Wirtz's playground. And the player that I compared that most to was a prime Kevin De Bruyne, where he is given the license to go and influence a football match where he sees fit. And he's given that license effectively by the other lads on the pitch. You have to maybe pull a little bit harder to make sure there is still balance and no holes when he's going off and doing his thing. But yeah, that was a very, very sort of encouraging comparison for me, because obviously Man City were interested in him. He was seen as being, well, we're losing Kevin De Bruyne, so let's go and get the next De Bruyne. And actually for Liverpool to come in and steal a march on that was obviously part of the really good positive signs around the summer's transfer business. And you're starting to see that in the West Ham game. There are other examples of him kind of doing this, but I think this is one of the first times where it's been coupled with a really positive eyeball test performance, and then the data as well. So as much as the heat map skews to the left, as you would expect, because I think that's the kind of areas he generally more prefers to play, you're also seeing him actually going everywhere. He's going across. He wants to go and play football with all of the good lads. If you're in possession of the ball, you need a pass, and so often Wirtz was that pass. And in addition to that, just in terms of some of the general basic numbers from the West Ham game, you've got his passing accuracy, which was 42 of 45 passes complete, which is 93% passing accuracy. Mentioned it elsewhere, but the creative players in football teams often have lower pass completions because they're trying more fanciful passes, they're trying line-breaking passes, and the things that really they are only of the talent, only have the possessed talent to be able to do such things. So De Bruyne's pass completion stats were often quite low. Trent Alexander-Arnold's were lower because, sometimes you try things, you've got the ability to pull them off more likely than anyone else on the pitch, but they're still really difficult to do. So sometimes they can be cut out or they don't quite work out for you. But yeah, you've got the license to try them. In terms of passes in the opposition half, 32 of 35, which is 91%. He was 10 of 10. In his passes inside Liverpool's half, so 100% completion on that. So when he was dropping in to do the neat and tidy stuff, he was being very, very neat and tidy, but then, pressing further up the pitch, getting more involved in the sort of harder stuff, in the tighter, more compact spaces. He was really flourishing with his passing, which is very, very good indeed. Yeah, and also get to key pass. And the really obvious stuff is it's a fabulous little ball round the corner, outside of the boot. Just such a beautifully deft touch to play in Cody Gakpo, who cuts it back, and Isak scores his first Premier League goal, which is very, very good. Very, very good indeed. But what's really interesting is that people are asking the questions like, where's he playing? What's his position? And the thing I think about the 10, my understanding of 10 and my feelings of a 10 sometimes is, and it comes a lot from Champ Manager and football games and again, old school classic notions of 10s are like Totties and Zolas and Bergkamps and what have you. I see that Littman in a bit for Liverpool as well. I see that as somebody who, again, plays behind the 1 or 2, has his little zone. It's almost like a circle in the middle of the opposition half where they influence the football game. It's not loads of pace. It's loads of close control and guile and playing through balls and that kind of stuff. Kenny Dalglish to Ian Rush, that kind of stuff. So I was a little worried about how you kind of make that work for Liverpool, or what would that look like? And because I think 10s tend not to work at the highest of high levels in the Premier League, because ultimately you just plonk a big old destroyer in there, and the Premier League's been chock full of just absolute yard dogs who you stick in front of the back four, old school, anchor man, call it the Makaleli role, call it whatever you want, footballing shithouses who exist to ruin the good things of football. Who are often, even nowadays more so, 6 foot odd people built like absolute wardrobes who just love to kill happiness in footy. And so the 10s kind of faded out, and obviously natural changes in formation have changed as well. People wanted 2 up top, and then the false 9 has become the new 10 in the last sort of generation. But it's interesting to see whether, Flo Wirtz is someone who can maybe bring this back. But maybe we're getting a bit carried away, but an interesting sort of discussion point, if nothing else. But anyway, so I was a little worried for Wirtz as being a 10, because I think of like Premier League 10s, and I think of like Bruno Fernandes, and I think of James Maddison as other examples. And I just think you can get stifled out of a game. You can stifle a 10 out. I think so therefore you have to be stupendously talented, because a lot of the attention falls on you. What you're seeing with Wirtz is fascinating, because he doesn't play there. He doesn't stand in this traditional 10 position. And again, our understanding for a 10 is like 10 yards outside the opposition penalty area. If you're in transition, maybe 20, 30 yards, whatever. But it's in that channel that runs from the edge of the centre circle, basically to the edge of the 18-yard box. And that is the zone of a number 10. Wirtz is in there at times, but so much of his time influencing the football match spent on the left. He's linking up with Kerkez. He's helping him out of problems. He's dropping a little bit deeper to play wall passes with McAllister or Gravenberch. He's going over and playing with Szoboszlai. He's playing with Joe Gomez. He's getting either side of the 8 corners of the 18-yard box. He's then going into more traditional territory, which is a strip across the width of the 18-yard box and looking to play through balls. He's everywhere, and this goes back to the De Bruyne style thing of, we call it a 10, but it's not really a 10. What it is a free role creative playmaker. And the fascinating thing about it, to take you back to the average positions on it, look at where Florian Wirtz's average position is for Liverpool. Yeah, it's right in the zone that you would call a number 10, because he's balancing the work that he's doing on the right-hand side of the pitch and the left-hand side of the pitch. And when you marry it all together, where is he? 10 for Liverpool, albeit in the number 7 chair. And obviously, as we mentioned previously, slightly more hotspots to the left. So yeah, there is a slightly left lean. And again, Alex Isak wants to go over there a bit more. So it kind of makes sense to get yourself a little bit closer over there. But I just thought that was a really interesting point there, that Wirtz goes everywhere, but the sum total of what he does equals 10. So when you look at the average positions, he absolutely played in the 10 for Liverpool, but when you watch the match, he's everywhere, and it's wonderful. The other addition to all this is the role that he has with Alexander Isak, so we'll move on to that next. Look, I think it's fair to say that Arne Slot's job was under a lot of pressure at the weekend. It remains under pressure. If Liverpool can't get back to more consistent winning ways, they're going to be in a real spot of bother, and his job is going to be on the line. I wouldn't say it was a Hail Mary of a decision to drop Salah and put the focus on Isak and Wirtz, but quite clearly you don't spend £250 million on 2 footballers to have them not be the central focus of your new look football team. Liverpool are always going to be building towards that. And I think Slot has wanted to do more of that, but he just hasn't been able to. So I went through in terms of how much those two players have actually been on the pitch. And if you think Liverpool have maybe been a bit flat and not been at the best, and yes, there's maybe defensive structural issues, but if you want to see what Slot's built, it doesn't look right for the 4-3-3 that Liverpool have played in recent years. So it's a bit of like, well, what are they trying to do? And without seeing Isak and Wirtz on the pitch, it is very difficult to understand it. And West Ham felt like the most clear version of that. So having gone through the performances, and there might be a few minutes off here, depending on whether they're counting injury time or not. In the Premier League, Wirtz and Isak have only appeared together on 5 occasions in the Premier League so far. That's in 13 possible games of football. Bearing in mind, of course, that Newcastle owned Isak for the first 3 games of the season, and then he wasn't involved for the 4th, which was against Burnley. So it's obviously shortened sample size already from that. I've written this all down, of course I have. There are a couple of sub-appearances in that, so against Everton, both of them come off the bench. But in the Premier League, anyway, 5 total appearances where they've been on the pitch in 5 different games together, but it's a grand total of 238 minutes out of a grand total possible of 1,170. And as already said, it actually isn't that, because the first 3 games of the season, Isak isn't even a Liverpool player. So it is actually, it's a slightly increased return on that, but the fact that is that Wirtz was played 82, 80 and 89 minutes in the first 3 games of the season for us, and Isak is technically still on strike for that period. So that's something that they were robbed of in that regard. And then you've got a couple of occasions where, for example, Brentford and Villa, Isak is injured for that, so they can't play together. Forest, Wirtz is injured for that, so Isak starts in that game, but again, they can't get on the pitch together for that one. In the Champions League, of the 5 Champions League games at time of recording, they played together against Atletico, Galatasaray and Frankfurt, although it's only 28 minutes in the Galatasaray game and only 45 in the Frankfurt game, where Isak goes off injured. He's then injured for the Real Madrid game, Isak, so they don't play together, and then Wirtz is injured for the PSV game. So in the Champions League, it's just 3 appearances out of a possible 5 where they play together, 131 minutes in total. So for all of that, 8 times this season that our mega strike force, our new look strike force, has appeared together for a grand total of 369 minutes of football, which equates to 4.190s of football, aka fucking nothing. So yes, Isak, people are saying, been disappointing. Yeah, look, he scored his first Premier League goal, he scored a goal in the League Cup, not enough for the return, but ultimately Liverpool haven't been able to get him on the pitch quite enough yet after the truncated start, which of course everyone knows. But in addition, it's all well and good getting Isak on the pitch, they need to get Wirtz on the pitch with him as well. And they've just had a little handover of that, where fate has sort of intervened and stopped them from being able to be on the pitch together. So I think it's worth taking it with a pinch of salt that what we kind of saw was not a great Isak performance against West Ham, although it was a very well taken goal. But you're starting to see just, again, the green shoots of recovery of what Liverpool might look like if you basically pin the team and build the team around these 2 guys. And of course, Frimpong when he comes back, and Kerkez will be another conversation. Where will Ekitike fit in? These are all wider conversations for another day. But I did think it was interesting to note that, yeah, Liverpool's hot new strike partnership, or new attacking partnership, whatever you want to call it, has figured on the same pitch for an equivalent combined total of 4.1 whole games of football so far. So to say that it's very, very early is absolutely correct. So no need to get too worried, no need to get too panicky about it. I'm certain both will come better and better. It was just nice, wasn't it, to have the West Ham game and look at it and go, yeah, it makes sense to me. Is this the plan that it was sold to Wirtz? It certainly looks like a version of it. We want to see more. We want to see that develop. And if you can get those 2 on the pitch more and more and more, Liverpool will be more of a threat and Liverpool will win more football matches. What that means for Salah, again, it's another conversation for another day. Any thoughts on this, let me know them in the comments section underneath. That would be absolutely wonderful. I just want to say, actually, yeah, please feel free to interact with me. I've got the Substack as well, but I'm doing some more written pieces post-match, the morning after every Liverpool match. It's called The Morning After. You can check that out on magepublishing.substack.com. And if you want to check out my first ever prose novel, It is sci-fi, time travel, World War II extravaganza, influenced heavily by the likes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Smallville. It is called The Eternal Flame, Yesterboy, and it is available exclusively in signed editions as well on www.maichpublishing.com. Totally different to all of this football stuff, but if you want to get a bit of distraction, if you like geeky sci-fi stuff and you like those shows mentioned, I think you'll have very good fun with it. We've broken our first milestone. We broke through 100, smashed through 100 sales. We're well on our way to 150. So yeah, if you're in the UK as well, you can still get one in time for Christmas. So yeah, please do consider ordering The Eternal Flame. That would be magic if you could. And a huge thanks to everyone who has so far. Beautiful of you, you wonderful, wonderful people. But yeah, just thought I'd have a little chat about Wirtz and Isak. Encouraging start, but it is only very much the start. There is hopefully loads more to come from them too. Oh, can't wait.